So welcome everyone. I'm together with my two colleagues from the Europeana Aggregators Forum Steering Group. So Kirsten Arnold from the APEF Aggregator, the archive for portal for archive, and Tom Miles representing Europeana Sounds Aggregator. And we are going to kick you off this meeting. Okay. So I will give the floor right away to Tom to get us to the common rules for any virtual meeting that you are very much used to now.
Right. Yes, thanks very much, Marie, and good morning, everyone. So we'll start off with just a few housekeeping rules. Keep your program close by because everything that you need is there. And please check your username so that it's understandable to us. So your first and last name and maybe what institution you're from. Please do mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and do feel free to use your camera, especially if you're asking a question. If you need to leave the room, then please turn your camera off. And we have guidelines, Europeana's inclusive engagement guidelines. Please do have a read through of that as you're using the chat and sharing comments. So also for chats, we use the chat room, and then there's also Q&A for actual questions to the speakers. Next slide, please. Yes, just what I was saying. So separate Q&A for questions. And also at the end of this, we do want to know how you feel the event went. So there'll be a survey popping up, and it would be very, very helpful to us if you could give your feedback, even if you felt there were some bits which could be improved. Next slide, please. So just to give you an idea of the Europeana initiative. Now we are made up of 3 pillars. The Europeana Foundation that looks after the website, the Europeana Network Association, and people from all areas who are interested in Europeana. And then there's the Europeana Aggregators Forum, which is us, and that's where all the data comes from. It comes from the data providers. They submit their content to the aggregators, and the aggregators then submit to Europeana. Next slide, please. And there are 40 of us across Europe and beyond. There are 40 accredited partners in the EAF, and 13 of them are domain aggregators. That's if it's to do with sound, or if it's to do with archives or museums. And then the remainder are national aggregators. So the green ones are the domain and thematic aggregators. Next slide, please. And here we all are. Each one of us has a logo, and some of us have a website in our own right. Others, like Europeana Sounds, are called dark aggregators, and we just aggregate to go straight to Europeana. Next slide, please. And we have a steering group, and the steering group members from the EAF are elected by the accredited aggregators. So Marie is the chair, Kirsten is vice chair, I'm on the steering group, and we are joined by Henning and Susanna from Europeana. And you'll see that this is a series of outreach events. So we had one on the 11th of July last year, 15th of December last year. We're in the middle now, and the next one coming up is 23rd of November. So these events are to give people an introduction to aggregation, telling them about the processes, discussing how we transform data into data that turns into web pages on Europeana. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Tom. So I will take over from here. So yes, thank you for the introduction, because I introduced my colleagues, but forgot to introduce myself, actually. So I'm Marie-Véronique Leroy from the French Ministry of Culture, and currently the chair of the EAF. And the reason why we kind of started all this series comes from the strategic context of the European Union, who kind of changed and gave some new priorities and orientations. And to present them, I'm going to call on stage Rihanna Schwininger-Ladak, who will give us the whole context.
Thanks a lot, Marie. Thanks a lot. So very good morning to all of you, and a very warm welcome from Luxembourg. So it's really a pleasure to be at this third outreach event, and it's really an important periodic meeting that we have, that this team has set up, and really welcome, because we really see the value and the need to really bring all the aggregators together. So if we can move to the next slide. So before giving you a bit the context, there is an important announcement that we wanted to make. So we will be working on a number of specific campaigns, and the one I'm going to be talking to you about today will be a campaign that we're launching to help our Ukrainian counterparts in terms of helping them out to support with equipment. And I'm very grateful for the Europeana network, represented by Sophie, Europeana Foundation through Lorena, the aggregators through Marie. So all your support is super, super important here, to make sure that we are going to be able to collect donate enough equipment to our Ukrainian counterparts. So the Ukrainian Ministry of Culture approached the Commission to see how we could help them, and see also how to engage the whole community in this effort. So as you know, unfortunately, a lot of damage has been done, but there is also a lot of reconstruction to be done. At the same time, what is fantastic is that Ukrainians are already thinking ahead. They want to see how they're going to rebuild the new Ukraine and how to engage already in the digital transformation process. So on the website, Laptops for Ukraine, from tomorrow onwards, you will see the content that they need. It is under the Swedish presidency, the auspices of the Swedish presidency, and it is going to be announced formally at the Digital Assembly tomorrow. But you will see the list of the equipment that they need. It's in terms of laptops for professional use, scanners, and there's a list where there is the right equipment, so that we can, you can take that into account in your efforts for donation. So really, please, this is a call to the entire community. You please act as multipliers so that we can really make this happen, and that the Europeana, the data space for cultural heritage community can help our Ukrainian counterparts, and also to bring them in the community. So this was a plea from us. Now, having said this, there will be another campaign on 3D, but I will be happy to mention that at the next meeting, which is also about mobilizing the member states' efforts on digitizing in 3D. But coming back to our meeting today, the context. So Marie, if you could go to the next slide. For those of you who are new to this forum and who are taking part for the first time, it is important to set this in a context where there are a lot of developments happening at the strategic level, at the wider EU level. So there is the efforts overall in terms of digital transformation of the different sectors. The Union has come with two overarching policies, which are called the Digital Decade, which sets a number of targets. And at the same time, it is the European Data Strategy, which is about exploiting the power and the value of data. So these things are happening, and it is about how can we make sure that our sector is not left behind. And on the contrary, our cultural heritage sector can benefit from the developments that are happening, and how can we use data to have better data-driven services, application, and engagement to get in cultural heritage institutions, and at the end, make the fabulous content that we have more relevant than ever. So it's really about using technologies and data to reach out better to the expectations of the different citizens and of cultural heritage institutions. So I won't go into the detail of these policies. You will have access to the slides. Now, in terms, Marie, if you can move to the next slide. Now, in the data strategy of the Commission, one of the main instruments to make sure that we share and reuse data as widely as possible, the concept of data spaces has been developed and will be deployed in a number of key areas that you see on the slides. And those are considered as key areas. And cultural heritage is, of course, a key area for the Union, which has been supporting the sector for now more than 15 years. Now, these data spaces, the objective of the data spaces is how can we make sure we have high quality data, different types of data, a lot of 3D data. How can we make sure that we can aggregate this data? How can we reuse this data? And not only within the sectors, but also across sectors. And to make sure that this happens, we have a number of instruments vertically within each sectors, but also horizontal support mechanism, such as the Data Support Center, the whole technical infrastructure, and all the governance that is put in place within each data space, but also across the data spaces. So this is just to show you the sheer scale of this whole endeavor. So we can move to the next slide. Now, in terms of architecture, the common data spaces, the way the Commission is approaching is, so you have these important verticals that you see on the slide, and from the ones that you see on the slide, there are two of them which are handled by my unit, which is culture and media, but we also have tourism that we are going to further develop, where we have important, links to be made, so verticals, where the whole point is how the objective is, how do we make sure that we engage stakeholders to make that data available, to have this rich pool, through governance and the right tools. And this will be supported by a horizontal, quite solid support system to make sure that the cloud solutions, but also all the high performance computing solutions can be made available to the different verticals. And there will be a number of other tools, such as AI on demand platform, the testing and experimentation facilities will come into this whole architecture and allow the verticals to go and tap into the possible solutions. Voila. So this is what I had to say in a nutshell. And I think, Marie, this is the last slide in terms of overall setting. And of course, not to forget the most important, which is the recommendation is the overarching policy that drives cultural heritage, where we mentioned what are our objectives in terms of digital transformation of the sector? How can we further support cultural heritage institutions? And what is very important is that in the recommendation, which was adopted in November 21, so it's almost, we get into 2 years, we recognize the importance of aggregators. Aggregators are fundamental intermediaries. They're not only data intermediaries, but they are also intermediaries in terms of digital transformation and in terms of outreach to cultural heritage institutions. And they play an important role in terms of norms and standards, in terms of aggregation, in terms of how the principles are going to be implemented, and also making sure that this reuse and collaboration are really going to happen. So you are key in this endeavor, and this whole point is about how can we support you better so that you can play your role. So this is, in a nutshell, Marie, what I had to say. And I think this is the last slide.
Thank you very much, Rihanna. So it was important to give the whole strategic and policy part of why we are gathering together today and why also aggregation is so important in this context. I will now hand over control and the floor to Kirsten to follow up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also, thank you again to Rihanna for giving this background for what we are currently working on. I want to continue this a little bit and look at what we currently have in terms of what was called the Digital Service Infrastructure, DSI, and what we will have to do in the context of getting to the data space for cultural heritage. And you can see kind of two different models here represented on this slide. At the moment, we kind of have a very stringent way of aggregation. So we've got the cultural heritage institutions. You might be working with either a national aggregator or a domain aggregator, and then via those aggregators, data is forwarded to Europeana and presented in the Europeana.eu portal. So there's a very stringent way from the bottom to the top, so to say. We do, of course, have aggregators, as Tom mentioned at the beginning, who have their own websites, their own services. So there's also representation there, but it all leads to Europeana in some way or the other. In the data space, and that is going to be the challenge that we need to tackle and kind of get a better understanding of what that actually means, is that we could imagine this workflow to be more agile, to include more actors, different actors, maybe also working with various standard formats rather than looking only at the Europeana data model as kind of the main target format to converge data into. And that also will mean that essentially the data that is held in the data space can, of course, still be presented via the Europeana.eu portal, but it could also be presented and accessed via any other type of website or app in the future. So there are a few initiatives going on at the moment where we are investigating different ways of doing things. And two initiatives that we wanted to mention are two task forces that are currently run by the Europeana Network Association and by the Europeana Aggregators Forum. That is, on the one hand, the Linked Data Task Force and then the Solid Task Force, and both are looking at a decentralized approach to aggregation. So kind of giving back control a little bit more to the edges, so to say, and how that could look like. So linked data is very specifically looking into proof of concept. So they are working on a pilot at the moment to present how linked data can help in such an approach. And the Solid Task Force is looking at various technological offers that are around at the moment in the context of the data spaces, and trying to understand what they mean and how we can make use of them in the best way for the data space for cultural heritage. And another initiative that is going on, and I'm going to put the link to this page also in the chat so that you've got the background information, but most importantly, also the link to the survey, is a survey that was launched by our colleagues at the Europeana Foundation around persistent identifiers, because that will be one of the building blocks that is very important in making all this work in the end, that we are sure how to identify the different bits and pieces that we will hold in the data space. And with this, I'm just going to bring us all back to the day today. If the slide starts moving. There's a little bit of a delay in there, but hopefully we'll get to the agenda slide. There we are. So we've already got 10 minutes delay, so we'll have to see how we can get that back. We'll now continue with an introduction into the Europeana initiative. Then we've got a use case from our Hungarian colleagues. Then we've got a 15-minute break, and then we will continue the day with 2 panels where we have various aggregators participating and a demonstration of the Sage tool, and we'll then conclude the day with some main topics and findings at around 12:20. And with this, I'm going to start the presentation of the Europeana initiative, and I'm going to hand over to Valentine Charles from Europeana Foundation.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Can you hear me well? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so as Rihanna has presented just earlier, we are operating in a very interesting context at the moment, where there are a lot of initiatives that are unfortunately imposed on us by the context, you know, war, climate change, etc. And there are also some interesting initiatives that are coming from the European Commission. So at the moment, you probably have heard now about the Common European Data Space for Cultural Heritage, which is the new context we need to operate on, which offers a lot of opportunities to us. But before talking about what it means in terms of change, let me bring you back to a bit back in time to explain where we come from, in fact. So in this timeline, I'm starting in 2008, which was the date of the birth of Europeana, as you know it. Even though, if you remember, the story started much earlier in 2005, when a big platform, which I will not name, announced that they would digitize all the books of the world, including Europe, which triggered a reaction in Europe. So there was this sense of urgency, something needs to be done, which then brought Europeana to us. Next slide, please. So step by step from 2008, things got in movement. So we got organized together. So now the Europeana initiative represents a group of a community of more than 4,000 members within the Europeana Network Initiative. We have 40 accredited aggregators working together with cultural heritage institutions to bring the data to Europeana. And the group of cultural heritage institutions at the moment represent more or less, more than 3,000 museums, libraries, archives, galleries, sorry, working together also to bring high quality data to Europeana. Next slide. So this organization has allowed building different services, which is now this centralized organization where data is flowing in through Europeana. Data is getting enriched and then published via different APIs. One of them allowing the publication of the data through the Europeana website. These data are being reused by a large group of reusers, ranging from researchers, creatives, teachers, heritage professionals, which create also new opportunities for the data to be reused in different contexts. To be able to build those services, one of the key work was to build frameworks. Next slide. Around this, which has allowed us to operate in a very open way according to principle of data governance, which are now ruled by frameworks such as the Europeana licensing framework or the Europeana publishing framework, which defines the rules of engagement within this ecosystem and has allowed the building of those products and services, but also has allowed also making sure we were operating in an interoperable way. So, for example, this is what the Europeana data model is for, allowing a common layer within this big ecosystem. So what does it mean now moving to the data space? Next slide. So Europeana Foundation has been tasked together with the Europeana Network Association, the Europeana Aggregator Forum, and 80 other consortium members to deploy the data space for cultural heritage. So far, this is what is our understanding of what it means to move from the digital service infrastructure to a data space. Next slide. It mostly means to be able to accommodate new use cases. We think that we need to mostly work on extending our framework and think about extending our framework a bit like extending our perspective on things. So a bit like you open a window on new possibilities. So what it means in terms of data governance, if we need to bring in new data, but also new use cases, what it means in terms of data quality, as we need to adapt to new type of usage, moving or continuing to operate on the screen, but the screens are getting much better in terms of resolution, in terms of features they provide, but also we have other use cases outside of the screen, what it means when you need to print a 3D object, for example. So what does it mean in terms of the quality that is needed to enable all of these use cases? So this is what we think we need to focus on. So think about the data space in terms of extending our framework so that we can expand the range of possibilities and opportunities for us to work together within this ecosystem. And when this is done, next slide, we think that we will be able to also work with new type of data. One of them was mentioned today, 3D, for example, but also develop new services, for example, around AI. And also rethink a bit the way we work together, the way we share data, share and exchange data, which is what Kerstin has presented. So how can we move to a more decentralized data sharing mechanism so that we can also work together in a more efficient way, but also in a more flexible way, so that again we have more opportunities to work with our data. So this is what I'm going to leave you with for today, and I hope you will enjoy the program for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valentine. So now the floor is to Sophie Tas, who is the Vice Chair of the ENA Management Board.
Thank you very much, Marie. Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here to click the stories of these three pillars of the Europeana initiative together. You've heard just from Valentine, let's say all or a lot about the data space, so very much driven by data, by digital collections. You know quite well, I believe, the domain of the aggregators, which is the pipeline, let's call it that, through which the data ends up in Europeana. There's this layer of cultural heritage institutions that provide the data and interconnect with the aggregators. And then there's the people that operate the CHIs, that operate the aggregators, operate Europeana, and that also form the end user group of what we're doing here in the context of the data space. So a lot of these people have connected together to form a democratic community that has this joint interest, and I would call it in many cases even a passion for digital cultural heritage. And this has become the Europeana Network Association. I am extremely proud and honored to be a vice chair on the management board, simply because these people, the members of our association, have actively reached out to form and to foster connections together. And we ask everybody at the moment when they apply to just pitch their motivation or their interest. Every single month, myself and our chair, Rob Davies, we look through those motivations, and I can tell you every single time, this gives me goosebumps. I'm definitely not the only person who really is feeling like a flag bearer for digital cultural heritage. There are many, many thousands, I would say, out there, and a lot of them have found each other here in the association. People do not only come from the CHI sector, though, so an interest can also be born in adjacent domains, including education, research. We have some creative practitioners, artists, students, media experts, communication managers, and so on. So this really is an ecosystem where you can tap into, not only to find and to communicate with your peers, but also, and maybe mostly so, to get inspired by and to exchange knowledge with slightly different action domains. What we actually then try to do at the network association is to pool all these forces, all this knowledge, all these insights, and to help, on the one hand, implement the contract for the data space, and on the other hand, to help design the future. So we are really thinking together with the other two pillars how we can make our adventure in the data space a long-lasting one, and one that benefits all the possible stakeholders. As I said, it's important that we not only are in direct flux of ideas with the Europeana Foundation, but also with our colleagues from the Aggregators Forum. So we regularly have common talks and meetings, especially now that we're thinking of establishing what we call so far country working groups, where we believe that dedicated ENA members and dedicated aggregators in specific countries could form together clusters of advocates, ambassadors for Europeana, that locally could raise awareness of the initiative, but could also help us build capacity in different national areas. I see that I needed to update my numbers because actually the ENA membership is now close, I believe, to 4,000. So this is a huge network that brings about its amazing opportunities. You can imagine that the years of experience and expertise represented here are almost uncountable. But on the other hand, it's a large network. And so we're constantly shaping and reshaping ways in which we can collaboratively get to our objectives. So maybe it's important to mention that, of course, our structure is fully democratic. We have a members' council that represents this large body of people. This council counts 36 councillors, which are elected and stay on for 2 years, and a management board of 6 people who kind of try to daily manage the ongoings within the association, helped, of course, by the Europeana office and our champions, Tamara and Susanna in particular. A lot of the activities within the association are carried out by or happen within the context of the 7 communities, 7 working groups, and 13 task forces that we currently have. And here I copy-pasted a screenshot from our 7 communities. You might have heard of them. They are focusing on domains such as research, education, copyright, and climate action. And there's one of them that I want to highlight specifically in the context of what you'll be discussing in the rest of the day, namely one of our ENA's 4 key areas of interest for these first couple of years of deployment of the data space. You can see here that I highlighted our interest in helping to build capacity within the network to support the reuse of high quality data. Now, of course, reusing data is something that comes at the very far end of the cycle of data gathering, processing, publishing, and so on. But I believe that the efforts in building capacity will be key over this whole workflow. So what we do in this area is to support training. How can you officially prepare your data so that many people will be inspired to creatively reuse them? We also want to help end users, potential end users, to see all the benefits in the digital collections represented on Europeana. And to arrive to that end, so to enable peer-to-peer learning within the network, we also need to get to know our members better so that we can really mine the expertise that's already represented there and see maybe how we can fill some gaps should we find some to exist. And then finally, it's our continuing mission to help share successful outcomes of reuse projects and to encourage any endeavors that our members might have to take up a creative role or activity. I wanted to point you specifically to our Europeana tech community. It's one of our most infamous, I would say, or illustrious and vibrant communities. They are extremely active. I do invite you to visit their little spot on the Europeana Pro website. I copy-pasted just a few of the things that they do. They have these inspiring task forces on AI, on 3D content, on supporting workflows from shelf to Europeana. There's a lot of data stuff going on here with people really beyond state of the art when it comes to data and technology. You can check out our full work plan for this year. And of course, if this is something that speaks directly to what you're interested in or what your organization is working on, then reach out and join one of these task forces, working groups, or become active in the community. I copy-pasted the link to the work plan here in this slide. The second link is equally as important, a warm call to action to all of you. Even if you're an accredited aggregator, you're welcome on a personal title to join the network association. So this is the page where you can submit your application. And for those of you who are already a member, I have 2 calls to action or 2 requests for you. The first one is that you'll respond to the survey that we'll send out, I think, over the next couple of days. This is a yearly satisfaction survey that we do with our members just to see how did you find this year in our company and where can we improve. And then finally, I want to make a warm call for joining and answering, responding to the initiative just launched by Rihanna and to support laptops in Ukraine. If this is something that speaks to your heart and to your organization strongly, please reach out to us. We have a working group on Ukrainian heritage, and we're always looking for more shoulders and more hands to go to work in this group. And that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sophie. So we are a bit beyond schedule, but it was really important for us to set the scene because we see a lot of new names among the participants. So I will keep it short for the part on the Europeana Aggregators Forum, since you already had a glimpse when the slides will decide to move on. Yeah. Because we are speaking of aggregator as this is something that is kind of fully understand, so I attempted a kind of definition here so we can be sure that you grasp what an aggregator is in the context of the Europeana initiative and for the data space. So an aggregator is really an intermediary between the cultural heritage institutions and Europeana, and the data space. And the aggregators really act as an expert hub to gather authentic and trustworthy and robust data to make it accessible to Europeana and the data space. We are also providing technical infrastructure and service provider for the CHIs, and we are also an agent for digital transformation. So we are mainly dealing with preparing the data, collecting it, and then transforming it in order to publish it, but we are also on a day-to-day basis really act for the capacity building and provide best practices for aggregation and data sharing towards the cultural heritage institutions. So globally, I think we can say that aggregators are advocate for digital cultural heritage. I'll go quickly through, because we already had a glimpse of how organized how is the landscape for aggregation. We have national, regional, domain, and thematic aggregators. And now currently, thanks to the recommendation, each member state are mandating the national aggregator and inviting them to collaborate with other thematic, domain, and regional aggregators. So our role and task as the EIF steering group is to support this community of aggregator and also organize the meetings that we have. So we have 2 meetings a year. And we also kind of now more and more like this outreach event, but also have some specific thematic drop-in sessions. And we have a Basecamp, which is a kind of collaborative tool where we share all relevant information and communication. I go quickly. So I won't go through into the details just to catch up a bit the delay that we have. But here you see our priorities as a European Aggregator Forum, especially in the context of the data space. So basically, it's about reinforcing the network of aggregator, building really the community, sharing best practices, give the floor to the aggregator. This is also why we are gathered today, so that you can have a glimpse of how each aggregator is organized. The close collaboration with the Europeana Foundation and Europeana Network Association, you have seen this is also a very essential part of the whole initiative coming up together, so we can really have all the data gathered at the Europeana and the data space level, but also the community of professionals and the community of users and people interested in digital cultural heritage getting what they want from you. So we will continue also to follow all the developments on the frameworks, the technical infrastructures. And one thing also that we will focus on is to advocate at European Commission and member states level to really strengthen and promote the role of domain, thematic, and national aggregator and really foster the collaboration between them. And also kind of connect much better way the digital strategies of member states with the aggregation path and strategy of the aggregators. I think that's my part for it. So we try to go that way, but still you will have access to the slides, so you can really go into the details for the rest. Without any further ado, I will now introduce one of the use cases that we wanted to present you. So I'm going to call on stage Henriette Eggedus from Forum Hungaricum, which is a national aggregator.
Thank you, Marie.
I think, yes, we hear you, and I think you get the control. Thank you.
Thank you. So as Marie mentioned, I'm Henriette Eggedus from Budapest. It's quite sunny today. Nice to meet you all. And I hope the slide will move. Yes. So I'm the head of the Digital Archive Development Department in Forum Hungaricum. And we have this database that we gather data since March 2013. So we are a decade old this year. Quite a big news to us. And since we launched, there are several national cultural digitization public employment programs that we managed. And since 2014, we are providing data to Europeana. And I have to mention that we used to be a part of the Hungarian National Digital Archive and Film Institute, and since 2017 we succeeded, so we don't have our collection anymore. We are just gathering data and aggregating to Europeana. I also have to mention that Hungary has a digital public collection strategy, and that strategy lays down our task. And you can see on my slide that there are several different sectors and several different national aggregators. Forum Hungaricum manages the other cultural institutions and the church-funded institutions. We are aggregating only those, but we are gathering from all the sectors. We have a cooperation model, and you have to know that we are advocating for a frame amount of public employee at the Ministry of Culture and Innovation. And this number will define, or this application will define the number of public employees that we can provide to our data providers. These are only human resources, but we also give them technical equipment if they need. In our contract with them, it's only for a certain amount of time and only for a certain amount of headcount or public employee, and it's usually for like 4 months. Today, this program is only 6 months that is ongoing, and they have to provide a working plan, and this working plan will tell us what would they like to digitize, how many records should we have, what kind of collections are they digitizing, and in which formats, and what kind of quality they will provide, and what kind of licenses they would like to use. And if they need any help with it, we will have them just to make this working plan. And of course, all of this is harmonized with the AIM system of the digital public collection strategy. We have more than 200 partners, former and current partner institutes throughout the country. So we are not digitizing in this place where I am sitting right now. We are digitizing throughout everywhere, and mostly using the National Cultural Digitization Public Employment Program. But if there is a data provider who don't want to have these human resources, they can join our program, but that will be a different contract without human resources, but they can have technical equipment. Of course, they don't have to use our equipment if they have better equipment or just doesn't have the place for it, or any kind of reason they don't want to use it. That presently there are a lot of public records in different types in our database. That number that I put in this slide, take it with a grain of salt. It's on Monday. I did put it on Monday, so hopefully there are more today. It's more than 13 million records, million metadata in our database, and more than 1,300,000 documents that can be found in a database. These are only the what we call a binary document, because there are lead pictures with every record in our database. So there are more pictures or documents that you can see in this slide. And of course, we are gathering different types, image, text, sound, AV, and 3D models in our database. We are in a desperate need of some help with our 3D models, but it's quite outdated. As I mentioned, we are doing this for a decade now, so a few of them needs an update. This is our website interface. This is our interface since 2016, I think. I hope it's very user-friendly. It's available in Hungarian and in English. It is accessible to disabled users. There is like a high contrast theme to use. If you can see that in the far right corner, there is a theme. So you can change to different colors or interfaces. It's quite cute. It has a responsive design. It has a suggestive search. You can filter possibilities, and it has a faceted search. So you can see there is type, there is year, there's organization. There's also what you cannot see on this picture, like medium and audience and licenses. And we also do a lot of virtual exhibitions from our data, and like every 2 weeks there is a new virtual exhibition. Most of them are available in English as well. For now, there are more than 300 virtual exhibitions on our site. Feel free to look at it if you're interested in Hungarian culture or history, or I don't know, there are a lot of stuff that my colleagues write about. And this is the site of one of our records. Europeana tend to use these specific record, and you can see in between the slides or in between the presentations that they use exactly this picture. That's why I choose this. It says sportolók in Hungarian, it's sportsmen in English. Our database is cloud-based and it's remotely accessible. There are 2 levels of data providers, partners and institutional partners. Nowadays, we are only or almost exclusively use the institutional partners because they can put more data than the partners. And as I mentioned, there are 5 record types. Altogether, there are 42 metadata fields, 6 are mandatory to fill in. You cannot publish without putting those metadata in. And our site search is in 28 metadata fields, so there are room to grow for this as well. And our public site can be accessed through visitor role and registered user role. And the registered users are the data providers, so you cannot register just on our database. And the registered users also have a search function that is only available for our data providers. They can search in identifiers, and a regular user would not use this search as a request for our data providers. And I would like to just dip in our toes in the process of exporting, because we will talk about it a bit more in detail in the later sessions. Our data provider has very important roles in the process of exporting, because they have to put in these mandatory fields, and also they would provide descriptions in English. They would provide sometimes the subjects in English, so it can be more accessible. And this is a picture of our editorial site. in this case, I'm the one logged in, so a data provider would see less because I have root rights to our database. And the thing that I want to show you on this picture, there is a Europeana export checkbox. And this will be checked if we will or already exported to Europeana this record. This can be checked automatically, or it can be checked manually. And for our data providers, to see what kind of records are already exported to Europeana, there is this report module. Also, I'm the one logged in, so there are a lot of folders. A data provider would only see theirs, and this can be exported to like an Excel sheet, and or just look at this window in our database. This is our interface for exporting. There are several other functions in our interface, but I'm only showing this because this is the one that relevant to exporting to Europeana. With this, you can generate XML files that describes our Manda database records according to the EDM standard. And this is the one setting the Europeana export checkbox automatically. With this one, this will place the XML files in folders on our RAPEX framework, and we would provide our data through OAI PMH protocol. And I can incrementally or fully ingest to Europeana. And I hope I was quite short so that we can catch up. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Henriette.
So we've got two panels today. With this first panel, we want to look more specifically at the technical part of data processing. So the workflows that have been established by various of the aggregators and the tools that they are using, either tools that they develop themselves or tools that have been developed in other contexts around the Europeana initiative. So I would like to welcome my colleagues Chiara Latronico from the EU Screen aggregator, Henriette, who we just heard from the Forum Hungaricum, and Tom Miles from the Europeana Sounds aggregator to the stage. So I think they should all be highlighted. I see Chiara, Henriette, welcome back. And thanks very much for joining us. And there's Tom. So we are now complete. Thank you very much, everyone. And we're going to start with our first question. And I'm going to start with the person we haven't heard from today. So that would be Chiara. Can you tell us a little bit more about the workflow at EU Screen once you have collected the data from the cultural heritage institutions and before you publish?
Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to talk a bit about Uscreen. We currently have two different workflows. One is proper aggregation. We deliver the data directly to Europeana. And the other one, we call it core because we publish the metadata and the content on the Uscreen website first before delivering it to Europeana. So with the first workflow, the so-called aggregation one, we can handle any kind of metadata standard input format, JSON, CSV, XML, the usual suspect, let's say. We upload the dataset in Mint, which is an aggregation tool developed by NTUA in Athens. And we can upload the data manually, or we can harvest it via OAI PMH. Then we do the mapping in Mint from whatever metadata standard we get to the EDM external profile, which is what the Europeana harvested. And in Mint, always we push it to the OAI PMH, where Europeana gets the data from. This is the simple workflow. The core one, slightly more complex because we need to comply to the UB core metadata standard. which has very specific properties like genotopic and specific thesaurus we use, which is for the audiovisual domain. And all of this property get mapped to the front end. So we do require these properties. So in the first mapping, we map to the UB core, then we publish in UScreen. We use also a tool that is called Preview that allow us to validate the data before we push it to the main website. And only after that, we map from UB core to Europeana. And with that, we have quite some automated process because it's a master file that maps automatically the main fields. And we do some enrichment as well with the IPTC thesaurus, which I was mentioning earlier. And once we map to Europeana external, then we push again to the OAI-PMH. I wanted to add that within some of the latest projects, like Europeana X6 or Europeana Crafted, we have got some AI enrichment that we push directly into Mint. So we output the enrichment in the metadata as well when we deliver the data to Europeana. That's the short version.
Okay, thank you very much, Chiara. Then let's continue with Tom and Europeana Sounds. How does this match with what you do in your context?
Well, it's quite similar, but Europeana Sounds, as I was saying earlier, is a dark aggregator. So we are just processing data for to upload onto Europeana, and I guess I'm half an aggregator and half a data provider, really, because I'm processing a lot of data from the British Library, and it could be sound or other formats. And each data set seems to have its own house style. So I do a lot of processing using OpenRefine, and I find that a very useful tool for sort of cleaning data and also linking up with other data sources. And once I've processed a data set, then as Chiara does, I map it to Mint, and I'm a big fan of Mint. Its the acronym is Metadata Ingestion Tool, and I find it useful because I think you don't need to have XML experience. You don't need to know about Python or anything. You just have to have a good grounding in catalog and databases. So I would then map it on Mint, and I can then see what the records are going to look like. I'll use the Metis sandbox, which is a way of previewing the data set on Europeana, and then if I'm happy with it, then I'll push it, and I can just sort of publish it on my Mint account, and it appears on Europeana.
Okay, thank you very much. Going back to Henriette, and I mean, you already kind of hinted a little bit at what your workflow is, but if I understood it correctly, it's slightly different because you're involving the institutions as well in kind of creating the data. So maybe you can now detail that a little bit more, how that works.
Yes, we're putting data directly and manually to our database. And we always teach them how to use our database, what is our we are storing data in Dublin Core and in XML form. So we are teaching them how to use that. There is a help desk help desk for it. So we will help any ongoing problem or every question we can answer via help desk. And there is also some guiding to publishing and how to use different licenses, because there's always a question about how to use that. And in our database, we always implement new changes like Getty vocabulary and something like that is always implemented. So we don't have to manually, we don't need to, but we do actually enrich manually as well. When they put data providers, when they put their data, you have to know there's coordinators at every partner institute. They check their data before publishing it. Then we check randomly because there are lots of data, so we can't check every single one of them. But if there's a new data provider, we will check every single new one very thoroughly. So there is no misconception. I can't speak. misconception about any DC terms or anything about our database. And yeah, we would advise to use our guiding documents because those are quite long and quite detailed. And then we just generate the XML files that describes our database reports, publish them reports according to EDM standards. When I generate these records, there's also some feedback for us if there is any kind of mistake, like there is a mandatory field maybe missing, which is quite unusual now, but it can happen. And we use our Epoch framework and OEI PMH, and we would like to improve how we collect data because this is very usable for smaller institutions who doesn't have their database. So, and several of our partner institutes doesn't have these, so that's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think that is probably a point that we are all still struggling with, how to make things easier, specifically for small institutions who don't have their own IT teams or their own kind of tech people, so to say, there. Getting to our second question, I mean, you all talked about the data processing with a variety of manual steps or kind of checkpoints where either you or the data providers will need to kind of look at the data and confirm that everything has gone right. So I'm wondering, are there any parts in your workflow at the moment that are already automated, or are you thinking about possibilities to automate the process a little bit more? And I'll start with Tom this time to maybe answer that question, specifically on the kind of half aggregator, half data provider perspective.
Well, I think there's probably there's an aspiration for content to just be on an OAI PMH, and so as it's updated or records are taken down, more records are added, more content, better quality content, then that could be sort of already mapped and just needs to be republished to Europeana. And I would like that to happen. I would like it to be more automated. The problem is in preparing the data to sort of go from one website to display nicely on another website, you often need to do quite a few just make some judgment calls about what data best goes in this field or that field, or would it be good to kind of merge two fields so they'll display all on the description. So I think I think there could be more you know, it would certainly be more efficient if you have the content that that can be sort of automatically updated. That would be great. But I think there would still need to be some kind of manual mapping going on as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Henriette, how does this resonate with you and kind of the context that data providers are all working towards the same central system, so to say, in your case?
You mentioned that you need to manually map. That is the only thing that we don't do manually. So it is such a weird thing that we are mirroredly working. So yeah, our expert model is, I would say, semi-automatic. And we would just pick the record and schedule and ingest. And we don't have to map to it because we did it in 2014, I think. I think I was involved as well, but I'm not sure, it was a long time ago. And we export in a regular monthly basis. So it is quite a relief that we don't have to map and enrich that much in manually. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, how's the situation at the Uscreen, specifically maybe looking at the aggregation and the core workflows that you mentioned earlier and how they differ maybe from each other?
Yeah. So personally, I think it's also a semi-automatic process for us. There is a lot of pushing buttons and validating data and checking. But on the other hand, let's say if the aggregation workflow is really almost manual, right? Because you can get any metadata format and you need to map it to EDM. So indeed, you need the human in between. The core process, because we map from UB core to EDM, that is more automated. With regards of, for instance, we add the literate of the thesaurus and we output in EDM SCOS concepts. Or for instance, because we publish first on the Uscreen website with the synchronization of the server at night with Mint, whatever's been published on Uscreen gets pushed back to Mint, so we get shown up and shown by an EDM objects links directly fetched from the Uscreen environment. So yeah, there is a lot of manual work within the mapping, you know, normalization, cleaning, mapping values, and you name it. But for the rest, I think it's a pretty smooth process.
Okay, thank you. Picking up on this and maybe also on something that Tom said earlier about kind of each data set having its own specificity, so to say. I'm just wondering, with all these manual steps that there still need to be in between, how much do you document what you do with the metadata, either of a specific data provider or maybe a specific data set, so that you can at least repeat that when you get an update of that and when you kind of, yeah, continue working with the same institution, so to say. And we'll start with Henriette this time.
Thank you. When I read this question, I was so excited because I don't know really. I need help how to manage data, about managing data, because I have an enormous Excel sheet. It's eating my ROM. It's really such an enormous file that it's no longer really serving its purpose. We have a massive, enormous log file about every interaction on our database. We used to interact with this log file to the end of time, but right now we just looking at only the last month, because this is also a huge file. there are reports for the data providers to see which of their records has been exported, and we have a monthly report to what kind of data are exported. We sort the data by dates, record types, also by data providers, and also if there is translations available. There are lots of to think about. And we also monitor our records tier list with dates, and we are manually enriching if those are in the lowest tier. So, and because I put this monthly report, this data is always getting bigger and bigger, and it's very hard to really visualize this data. And I need to present it from time to time to look at how much we did with every record, and what we did with every record, and what kind of digitization happened. So I really need help, and I'm really interested in how you manage this data. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if Tom maybe has an answer to this from his context.
This is this is a bit yeah, this is a very good question. I mean, I'm revising data sets all the time. And you know, as I revise, I kind of think, oh, I didn't realize I could do it this way. Oh, it becomes easier to convert subject words into, say, Wikidata links. And I'll update, and then I think, well, if I've done that with that data set, I can do it with another data set. Now, do I make a note to say I have now added Wikidata links to a data set? No, I don't really, and maybe that would be a good thing to do in a kind of, you know, on a sort of just a README text box or something that could be on Mint. That, you know, just to sort of, if somebody was going to take over from me, then they could see what needs doing. I did want to say that you know, data sets don't necessarily get better information to go up a metadata tier. It's actually the way that it's mapped, making sure that all the fields are sort of working properly together, so that it can get a higher ranking of, say, B or C. Yeah, so I mean, you know, you would see a kind of there would be evidence of data sets improved on the Europeana dashboard, and there would also be a log on the Mint account of, you know, the mapping was changed on this date and this date and this date. So there would be a sort of automatic log file, but you know, that the sort of you know, cataloging of cataloging could get a little bit, you know, sort of laborious, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. I will have a follow-up question on this, but I first wanted to hear from Chiara how this looks like at the screen.
But I do think that actually documenting is the real manual job with regards of metadata. We do not document, indeed, as Tom was saying. If we have to reuse mapping, it is possible. You can do that within the same data provider, with a different data provider. You can copy them and edit them so that you don't lose the original mapping, for instance, if it was applied to a data set already. So all that is very well documented in Mint, I think. You can check the log and see when it last was published on the IPMH, when the last transformation was, and so on. What I found really challenging to document is everything else, right? communication with the data provider, number of records enriched, links to the different environments where these data sets are. To be honest with you all, I found for myself, this is not a Uscreen solution, it's a Chiara solution. I made an adaptation, let's say, of the Trello board in which every card becomes a data set and not a task. And within that, I have all information from the OIPMH link, from the Jira ticket in Europeana, I mean, the data set in Europeana, you name it. And because I get pretty analytical with this kind of work, I go and add information as when I last sent this data set to Europeana, when it last was published from Europeana, and also the communication with the data provider, when I communicated and for what reason. And that's the real manual work, I think. I do not have any idea how that could be automated, to be honest with you, unless we really don't create an infrastructure in which all the system communicates with each other and everything gets pushed back to whatever centralized system where all the data sets and the provider and so on are. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
Thank you very much, especially for sharing the Chiara solution with us. I think that's a pretty swift move to adapt Trello like that. So I actually have two follow-up questions now, and as with actually quite good in time, I'll ask both of them. So I'm just wondering, and also kind of looking at this from my perspective in Archives Portal Europe, and it might be very similar in your context. I mean, apart from documentation always taking the most of the time of an actual step, is there also a tendency maybe that we don't necessarily feel the need to document because we are all working in relatively small teams? So it will be you again, Tom, who is kind of gonna work on the same data set when it comes in the next time. So it's more likely that you will remember what you've done the first time rather than having to write this down for someone else. So is that maybe an aspect of this, just kind of as a sense check?
Yeah, as a kind of in terms of a sort of there'll be a legacy of data sets, but I think it's actually more there's as I've been working on this, I think the standards of improving metadata have got higher, and so there's a sort of aspiration to improve all the data sets to get to a certain point, and so maybe I could generally say that all the data sets would need some kind of SCOS concept, so linked open data, and they would need to, if it involves a creator or a contributor, then you would want a Wikidata entry for them or a VIAF entry for them. So I think I would say generally, if I needed to sort of let people know what state the data sets are, I think it would be to say, well, this is basically the high level that we're aiming at now, and some data sets will need improving, but you'd be able to see which ones you'll be able to see in the mapping that some data sets need more and others are good to go.
Okay, thank you. Henriette, Chiara, any additions from either of you?
The only thing I want to say, it's of course it is a tendency that if you work with this data, you don't want to always remind yourself what you already did with these data sets. But if you have my memory, you have to remind yourself what have you done, and you will need to put some kind of log out for you. So you would remember that, yeah, that data set needed love and I give love, but those data sets need another kind of mapping or enrichment, and we need to improve that. But my memory is not serving me well, and we are doing this for 9 years, and it was not always me who exported these or enriched these, so it's needed for us, these log files. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that addition. Then to my second follow-up question that I just thought about, and that also connects us a little bit to the fourth question that we have for this panel. So I'm just wondering, in the context of the data space, and where we said it might all become a little bit more agile, there might be more actors and more different interactions between those actors that we currently have. Would you foresee that at some point the documentation that we're currently doing for ourselves also becomes part of the metadata, so that anyone who picks up on the data set knows what happened with the data set, when and who did it? And I'm just opening the floor to anyone who wants to pick up that question.
Well, that would be amazing. Of course, I'm not fully sure if would be within the metadata or maybe in a different system, let's say, where all information again can be pushed back from number of tier per data set, number of enriched record, and so on. But yeah.
Okay. Henriette, Tom, any thoughts from you?
Yes, I think with the digitization, the aim is to these metadata outlive us, and so we have to be, these files these metadatas about metadata have to be a part of the metadata. I'm sorry if I put a quite interesting way, but I hope you understand me. So yeah, have to be a part of it, I think.
Thank you. Tom?
I think it's I feel this new data space is very much about, yeah, the interactions between various data sources. So I think it how it develops would be to be reducing this sort of the amount of kind of diving down foxholes and finding what you're looking for, and then having to go to another source to do the same kind of thing. I think it will. I would like it to be kind of linking across at item levels, so that you can see more information about a particular cultural heritage object, or the history around it, or the geography around it, so that it's so that there are far more open doors that you can take to explore once you've found a particular object and it takes you somewhere else.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just picking up on that picture that you just painted, Tom, and leading to our last question for this panel. How do you think the data space, with what you just said in mind, will influence or impact the workflows that you currently have in place? Do you envisage that to change in any way, and if so, how?
Well, I think the linked open data will become more important. So because that will become a real hook that you can sort of link up to something else, you know, and if you think about what's kind of out there, you've got Wikipedia articles, you've got scholarly articles, you've got you've got connected objects, and that's what Europeana, I mean, the magic of Europeana at the moment is that you get to see something alongside an object which is, you know, 3,000 miles away from it, and you get to sort of see them all in the same place. So I think I think it will become more important to sort of add that general but very solid information that will link objects together.
Okay, thank you. Chiara, how do you think a use screen will look like in the data space?
That is a really difficult question, to be honest with you. As far as I'm not sure how it will affect the workflow, but we do hope to have a smoother process to include the AI enrichments that are produced by the projects. Because among those AI enrichment, there is also semantic enrichment, indeed what Tom was saying, with linking to other objects and so on. But I think we need to work on our infrastructure in order to get the best from all of this that we're building, this network of data that we're building. The other thing, yes, we hope to be in very much contact with both aggregators, CHIs and Europeana to actually understand how to make the best use of this developing data space, let's say.
Okay, thank you very much. And Henriette, how does this look like from your perspective?
We also don't know what to expect. How will data space affect our workflow? I only expect it to affect it. So hopefully we would improve our methods, our infrastructure, and I really would like it to be to help us and to help the interoperability between databases. And I hope it will only affect us in a good way.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. The good impact that the data space will have on all the work that we've been doing and all the work that we've been doing specifically with the cultural heritage institutions that we work with. I'm just going to check the chat if we had any questions, which I don't think we've had, at least not specifically towards any of our panelists at the moment. We've still got a few minutes left, so I don't know if any of you had anything else in mind that they might have wanted to kind of just bring to the table that we haven't touched on so far. Or any questions that you might have for any of the other panelists? That doesn't seem to be the case at the moment.
That was a drilling sound.
That's all in the data space, Tom. And it's specifically for you with Europeana sound. So you will have to figure out what that was, where it came from, what it meant.
Catalog it,
who
upload it,
sound, and all of that. And then, of course, link it with all linked data URIs that we can connect it to other things. Okay, well, then I would say we close this first panel. I would like to thank our three panelists very much again. And I think I'm briefly going to hand over back again to Marie for introducing our next speaker.
Yes, thank you, Kerstin, and thank you very much to Chiara, Henriette, and Tom for their input for this panel. And I must say that I'm a very big fan of the Chiara solution. I think we are going to implement that for our aggregator. So thank you. Now we have, because you have been, you have seen the whole workflow, you have the input and the use cases and how 3 aggregators are organized, and now as not a set of tools from provided by the National Technical University of Athens. Now you have SAGE. There is something about spicing up the the data there, I think. After Mint, now you are going to have a demonstration of SAGE, which is a tool that has been used on the Crafted project. And I give the floor right away to Alexandros Chortaras.
Okay, thank you. Hello to everybody. I'm Alexandros Chortaras from the National Technical University of Athens, and in my presentation I'm going to present you the SAGE tool, in the production of which I'm participating as the main developer and designer. I will go first through a set of slides to give us general information about SAGE, with emphasis on the enrichment process, and then I will do a brief demonstration, again focusing on the enrichment. Just to request control. So to start with, SAGE is a linked data management and enrichment platform, and as such, it provides 3 main functionalities. First, import data from various sources and formats and convert them to linked data. Second, publish the imported data and thus make them available through several APIs that provide different ways to access them. And third, apply processing services on the imported data, and more in particular, for more interest to us, data enrichment and validation services. SAGE allows importing data from several common formats, such as XML, CSV, JSON, and so on, and from several sources, such as REST APIs and relational databases. And it is important to note that all the data are imported in SAGE as linked data. In fact, the importation process is at the same time a transformation to linked data process, and transformations are performed by user-defined or predefined data mappings using an RDF mapping language that we have developed at our lab called D2RML. Publication makes available the imported data by loading them to an RDF store, that is, a database for linked data. SAGE is not itself an RDF store, so a third-party RDF store must be used that fulfills certain technical requirements, and currently we offer support for OpenLink Virtuoso and GraphDB. The published data are then available through SparkQL endpoints for querying. The data can also be indexed using a flexible indexing mechanism and made available through appropriate search APIs. Finally, distribution of the data can be generated, that is, data dumps for direct download. Finally, of most interest to this event is that SAGE includes components that allow automatic enrichment of the published data using several annotators, which can be based on external third-party data processing services. Once one or more datasets have enriched, validation campaigns can be set up to allow humans to go through the annotations and accept or reject them, or add new manual annotations. So after this short overview, let's focus more on the enrichment component of SAGE. Enrichment is done by applying external data processing services, the annotators, to selected part of the data. Annotators compute and return a set of linked data URIs that are somehow relevant to an input data value. It is important to note that any external data processing services that can provide such enrichments can be easily added to SAGE by writing an appropriate interface, service interface. SAGE currently provides 3 main types of annotators. First, we have the SparkQL annotators, which link a text to external knowledge bases by querying a SparkQL endpoint like Wikidata or the Getty linked data vocabularies. Second, we have NERD annotators that perform named entity recognition and disaggregation on text. Examples of 2 NERD-based annotators that SAGE provides are annotators that work with the mGenre NLP library and DBpedia Spotlight service. And finally, we have the thesaurus annotators that perform smart string matching to link terms in text to a given vocabulary. Before performing the matching, the input data may be pre-processed in order to be brought to an appropriate format using regular expressions-based transformations. This data processing is available for all annotators, of course. Next, let's see one example for each annotator type, starting with the SparkQL annotators. SparkQL annotators work better on fields with small text and specific type information, and usually the user has to manipulate first a bit the data in order to bring it to a suitable format and then write the appropriate SparkQL query. In this example, the data have a creator field written in a specific format, And because PyQL queries typically work with exact string matching, we have to transform the string to the exact string expected to be found in the external knowledge base as the name of that particular person. Thus, we manipulate it with a regular expression first, and then by formulating the appropriate PyQL query, we send it to Wikidata endpoint and retrieve the respective Wikidata entry. Nerd annotators are more automatic since they can handle directly any text with no manual intervention, preferably longer text with rich context, which helps the underlying tool derive the correct entities. Typically, nerd annotators first detect name entities like person, place, and so on in the text, and then try to link these entities to entities of a knowledge base like Wikidata using the context. In the example of this slide, the tool detected 3 named entities and was able to correctly link them to the respective painting artist and institute entities of Wikidata. Thesaurus annotators link text to the terms of a given vocabulary, employing string matching techniques and lemmatization. The vocabularies should be SCOS vocabularies and should be also imported to SAGE similarly to other data sets. The matching is done using the labels of the vocabulary's terms. In this particular example on the slide, we see the detection of some materials and colors in the text from a given vocabulary. After data sets have been automatically enriched, SAGE allows humans to check and validate the enrichments through a validation process. For large data sets, this process can typically take place only on a relatively small sample of data, as it is normal. To facilitate the process, the validation is done not on an item-per-item basis, but in a bulk validation mode, where identical values, which would have given identical enrichment, are grouped and presented together, sorted by frequency, and thus are validated together. The validation process is organized around validation campaigns. To join a campaign, a validator requests access to it and can proceed with the validation of its datasets once the administrator of the campaign accepts his request. And once a validation campaign is completed, certain statistics can be computed about the accepted and rejected annotations. These statistics are then helpful for generalizing the results of the validation to the non-validated part of the enrichment and possibly for improving annotator configuration. And finally, let's see briefly how SAGE can be used to enrich data from Europeana and interact with the MINT tool. For data importation, SAGE provides some parametric import templates to directly import data from Europeana's and MINT's API in the ADM model with minimal manual intervention. Then data are published in SAGE as RDF, so that annotation and validation can be performed on selected datasets and properties. The annotation and validation results are exposed then through an API to MINT, which can collect them, apply an additional filtering, and publish the enriched dataset back to Europeana. This slide provides some numbers on the current use of SAGE. It has been used in a couple of Europeana enrichment projects and produced about 4 million annotation and 1.5 million enriched records. About 60 users have been involved and several European aggregators. It is also important to note that SAGE has been used also in other non-Europeana related projects, such as Tier Data, where it has been used to publish as linked data in a common model, business registry data from several European countries. You can have access to the code and the documentation in the link provided. And through its use in this project, several directions for extension and improvements of SAGE have been identified. I will just mention indicatively a couple of them. For example, an extension could be to make more flexible the validation procedure by allowing different groupings and sorting of the annotations, for example. Another feature would be to improve the annotation export process by integrating more filtering options based on the statistical analysis results and possibly allowing pre-filtering of annotations before they are made available to human annotators, so to discard obviously incorrect annotations. And another significant update I want to mention is the interface redesign, which would make clearer the workflow between the data processing steps and provide a better user experience. And in fact, this upgrade has already been planned, and the complete redesign of the interface is expected with the next few months. And in the context of the AI for Culture project, we will work also on the Dockerization of the platform and improving its documentation. And I should also note that SAGE is under continuous development, so new features and improvements are added quite frequently. So now let's try to give a demonstration. I need, sorry. Okay, I can share now my screen. So can you see my screen now? Yes, okay. So I will give a brief demonstration focusing on the enrichment and the validation process. And to begin with, a user, to get access to the content, needs to sign in. And Sage runs on several instances. Each serving a particular project or organization. And in this demo, I will sign into the crafted projects instance. There are two main sign-in roles: the editor role that provides full privileges to a user, in particular to import, edit, enrich published data, create validation campaigns, and the validator role that allows a user only to join a validation campaign and make validations. I will log in as a user that has editor privileges. And after logging in, we see the set of already imported datasets. When we click on a dataset, we get information about it, metadata, and also including information about the mappings that have been used to import the data. In this particular case, we see, for example, a mapping based on a predefined template to import a dataset from Mint. Of course, we can add the new datasets, either using predefined templates or by defining our own mappings. After executing a mapping, we can see the results of the mapping. That is the raw RDF data that has been produced by the mapping. And after executing the mapping, all mappings of a dataset, we can publish the dataset, so to make available its data. Then by clicking on the Published Data tab, we see all the imported and published datasets, on which we can then apply the several processing services. When we select the published dataset, this Sage displays first its schema, which is automatically computed after its publication. The schema allows us to see what entities are present in the dataset, their counts, what are their properties, and get an overview of the property values. In this case, for example, we see that we have provided SageO items with creator, date, description, properties, and so on. By clicking on a property, we can get a list of its values. And we can see also the actual items that have a particular value by clicking on the icon below the frequency item, which redirects us to this window with the list of the items. And by clicking on a particular item, we're redirected to a view where we see all properties of the item as published in the underlying RDF store. After we inspect the schema and the values to identify the enrichment needs, we can proceed to the actual enrichment process by adding annotators. As we can see in this example for the creator case, we can add several annotators in order to experiment possibly with several configurations or get enrichments from many sources. And once we are happy with the results, we can publish them. In this case, we see that we have several annotators, in particular several nerd annotators, not published, and a SparkQL annotator that has been published. We see that the nerd annotators have few parameters, while the SparkQL annotator is essential to provide an entire query, SparkQL query. We can always add or edit an annotator with an interface like this that we give the several parameters. Then once we execute an annotator, we can preview the results, so to inspect their overall quality in an interface like this. And in this interface, the annotated items are grouped by value. So on the left, we see the values along with their frequency of occurrence, sorted by that frequency. And on the right, the enrichments that the annotator has produced for this corresponding value. For each enrichment, we can see the respective URI, its label and description if available. We can see also the confidence score produced by the annotator. And of course, we can visit the annotator URI for more information if we want to do so. And once we publish the annotator results, they are made available for validation. The validation is done per field. So we have to activate a validation process on that field, which in Sage is called paged validation. For an active page validation, Sage presents to the user a validation editor interface that allows him to perform the validation with several options. It needs some time to load. And the interface is similar to the one we have seen before for previewing annotator results, but allows a user to accept or reject annotation and also define a target property if the property to which the annotation should end up in the ADA model is different than the original one. During validation, the user gets some information about the current state of the validation from the background call of each annotation. Gray means no validation has been made. Green means majority of validations for the particular enrichment is accept, and red means the majority is reject. The user validates the annotations on a per page basis, and once he's finished, he can save validation and proceed to the next page. And of course, you can always come back and make changes. To manage validation campaigns, Sage provides the Campaigns tab, where the user can provide access to particular validators to participate to a validation campaign. In the Campaigns tab, we see the active campaigns and the validation progress for the datasets in each one of them. In this particular case, we see that we have two datasets, and we see the progress for each property of each one dataset. For example, we see that for the creator of the first dataset, about 87% of the enrichment have been validated, and the green portion of the acceptance range correspond to acceptances, and the red to rejections. This is exactly the view that the validator sees upon logging into Sage, and he can access the validation editor interface we have seen before through the button next to each property. The only difference is that the editor user can see the users that have been joined the campaign, while the validator sees only the active campaigns and can request access to them. When validation is finished, the user that has started it, he must stop it and publish it so that the produced validations are added together with the annotation results in the underlying RDF store and make available to any applications that need to access them through an API interface like Mint, for example. So this was the brief demo of Sage. I hope we gave a very general idea of how it works. I would also like to mention that apart from the functionalities that I had mentioned that are about validation, Sage has many more functionalities like creating multiple indexes on the data, computing and indexing embeddings, validating the schema of the important data using SAGL, adding custom dataset metadata, creating catalogs of datasets, creating data dumps, creating automatically scheduled tasks, and so on. And as I have mentioned before, a complete redesign of the interface is expected to take place in a few months, so to provide a better user experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandros. Very happy to see the data set from a French partner there at the Mobilier National, so thank you. Now it's up to Tom to announce the second panel.
Yes, thank you. And thanks very much for that really interesting presentation, Alexandros. So my panel, we have some more questions. And just going over to the questions now. And I'm very happy to introduce more of our aggregation partners. First of all, we have Haris Georgiadis, and from Search Culture based in Greece. We have Marco Scabaci from Museo, and we have Marcus Smith from Soch, based in Sweden. And we've got some quite tough questions here. I'm quite happy to be asking them. And and certainly need to think about them as well. So I'm going to start off asking the first question, which is, how do you involve your CHIs in the data processing phase? And I am going to ask this question in reverse alphabetical order, which I think is Marcus. Marcus, would you like to start that first question for us?
Sure. So SOC is the Swedish national aggregator, and I think compared to many other aggregators, we're fairly strict in what we require from our data partners, our CHIs. SOC has its own RDF-based data model, linked open data, and we require our data partners to map their own data to that model. We don't do any mapping for them. We require that they provide their data in that format via the OAI PMH protocol. And we also have a number of requirements for the data itself. We require, of course, since we're providing to Europeana, that the metadata is all licensed to CC0. We require that it's already published somewhere on the web, so we have a source that we can link to, and that any associated media has to have an accompanying rights statement, either that it's in copyright or hopefully that it's some open licensed according to the Europeana license rights model. So we don't really to do any of that mapping for them. However, once we have that data in the format that we use internally, we then have our own mapping on to EDM, and we take care of that for them. So they don't need to know anything about EDM. We take care of that once we've got the data in. And also, I think in distinction to a number of other aggregators, we don't actually do any data enrichment at all, other than the kind of enrichment that you get from inbound links to data. We take the position that data enrichment happens optimally at the source rather than in an aggregation phase. So instead, we work with our CHIs to help them improve the quality of their data at the source rather than doing that enrichment for them.
Right. Thank you very much. We've got some follow-up questions which are sort of connected up, but which you've sort of touched on. But let's go on to Marco from Museo. How do you involve the CHIs in the data processing phase? Muted.
It's a usual mistake for me. Good morning, everyone. Usually, there are two main phases. Considering that our content providers usually do not have any expertise on aggregation workflow and Europeana standards or requirements, we have first an online meeting where in a colloquial style we ask our content provider to present the features of their collection, and we ask them if the database is online, which metadata standard they use, and then we illustrate them the steps to be followed. For example, the EA signature, analysis of the database, mapping between their metadata schema and the DDM, the workflow of the enrichment process, that they usually provide their contents using or Excel files, all Dublin Core metadata. Sometimes they provide contents through the OAI PMH protocol. And then we show them also concepts concerning the Europeana tires and the licensing framework, explaining them the importance of using open licenses and eventually the adoption of the IIIF standard. Finally, we asked them to send us some records, like examples, records of the database in Excel file, in CSV file, XML file, and also some sample of digital resources. Museu does not interfere with the choice of the materials selected by our content providers, essentially.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, thank you, Marco. And Harris, how do you involve your CHIs?
Yes. Well, the general case since the last couple of years is that we have issued some specification and interoperability guides, something like the Europeana publication framework, let's say. So we ask from our CHIs that to support no IPMH protocol for harvesting, and also they give them a variety of choices between metadata schemata. We promote EDM, of course, but also there are other choices that they can choose, like OIDC or qualified DC. In combination with METS, for example. There are some options that they do have. So we don't do custom mappings because we have already implemented mappings from these available metadata schemata that we support to EDM. However, there are exceptions, of course, and sometimes we have to make some corrections when they misuse the field, for example, and we have to switch it. And then if in the first phase, we communicate a lot with them in order to make them do improvements or corrections. But then when we start processing the data, which we actually we mainly focus on enrichments, on types, on persons, on subjects, on places, and on historical periods, and we also normalize dates and time spans. So after we complete all these curation phase with the enrichments in all those fields, we publish the collection in an acceptance portal, which is accessible by the provider. So sometimes we have a discussion with the provider before we publish the collection in such cultural GR and before we deliver it to Europeana. And then we may discuss some problems, especially with the arrangements that we do on behalf of them. So this is mainly their involvement. What we try to do now is, for example, our vocabularies that we have developed for the arrangements are published as linked open data, and providers and everyone can freely use them. So, for example, now we issued a guide where we try to help providers to use their our vocabularies if they wish to, and we give them some APIs in order to integrate the vocabularies, for example, with their repositories, in order for them to have the power to make their enrichments in the source and in their in their infrastructures. But this is, we will see how this will go on, and if the providers have the willing to do that.
Right. Thank you. I think all of you have really sort of answered the follow-up question for that question, which is, does the aggregator set any rules for CHIs? when providing data, or can CHIs provide anything they can? And I think we've covered that. Unless anybody wants to sort of have an extra comment. So I'll go on to the next question, which has also been sort of slightly touched on. How do you explain or demonstrate or validate the processed data with the CHIs? And is this a formal procedure, or is it done on a kind of one-to-one basis? And I'll start with Marco for this one.
Usually, also in this case, it's done one-to-one basis. As I said before, we first analyze the database features, and we check with our content provider if the database is clean, or if it's necessary to apply some procedures in order to clean it. And in this case, we invite our content provider to use, for example, text editors, or tools like OpenRefine, as you know, Tom, in order to clean databases, because often values are not so clean, values being present in the databases. And in fact, we check if there are missing metadata or metadata to be improved. We check also if the enrichment is done, after having explained how to do it. And deciding together with which vocabularies also, because when we explain the general rules, we show them that, for example, in the EPF there are mentioned a lot of vocabularies that they should use. For example, geonames, getty, thesaurus, and the others. Once the process comes to the end, using Mint, we open a ticket on we open a ticket in Europeana using the Jira software, waiting for a Europeana response, and if something can be improved, we see if it can be done internally, or we need again we need the content provider contribute. We can say that this workflow is not very much automated, but artisanal in a certain way. But we think that at the moment the results are good. In this way we can reach often a good quality of metadata tier, and content tier is a little bit more difficult, because as you know, it depends on a lot of parameters. So and in this case our contribute is minimum. Sometimes the process is very long, and take a lot of time from the first contact with our partner to the publication. But it depends on my side often, because there are a lot of activities to do concerning the databases, because sometimes they have to be cleaned.
Yeah, so I mean, it's often a kind of the initial phase may be quite involved, and then once the CHIs have got to grips with the process, then they can be left alone to sort of keep going with the occasional kind of nudge, I suppose. Yeah. And Harris, what sort of do you have a kind of one-to-one with the CHIs, or is it a sort of more structured?
Yes, I would say that it's mainly one-to-one. The way we try to demonstrate and explain the data after our processing depends on the maturity and the expertise that each provider has, because we have some providers that we talk with librarians and with people that are very familiar with cataloging and with metadata schemata. So in this case, it's much easier to discuss on problems that there are, for example, in the data. But there are the cases where we have small institutions, and sometimes we don't speak directly with employees from the institution, but we speak sometimes with the technical company that supports them, because it's easier to discuss on very technical issues. I would rather that we try to help as we can, depending on each institution. So this is why we don't have something more standardized or something like more, formal.
Right. Okay. Well, no, thank you. And Marcus.
Yeah. So our relationship is very much on a one-to-one basis still with our data partners. When we get a new data partner who joins us, more often than not nowadays, there already is an existing mapping because there are a limited number of collection management systems in use in Sweden, and most of the larger providers now have a mapping to the SOC data model built into their product. But in the cases where that mapping doesn't already exist, we provide support to the CHI in creating it. We won't do it for them, but we'll provide the technical support and the resources they need to be able to do it themselves, or to hire a developer to do it themselves. And once that data is then ready for harvesting, either from an existing mapping or from a new mapping, we have a one-to-one dialogue. We have an iterative process with them where we do a test harvest to a test environment on our servers. We go through the data and have a look at it just to make sure that everything's okay. We check back with the data provider, provide them with feedback on what needs to be changed, if anything. But once that's all done, we put it live. We do a live harvest to the SOC system. And from that point onwards, everything is automated. We schedule harvests every week or every month, depending on the requirements of the data partner. And everything usually runs fairly smoothly from that point on.
Thank you. Now we're running a little bit short on time, and I think I'm going to ask the last question, I think, and which is, do you have any methodology or activity to build the capacity of your CHIs during this phase? And are you including the data space and its possibilities into your capacity building? So just sort of thinking about building capacity. Harris, could you say something about that, please?
Yes, well, over the last 2 or 3 years, for example, we organized webinars, most of them targeting CHIs, in order to for example, explain the guides, the interoperability equality guides for publishing their collections in an interoperable and reusable way. Or a webinar where we explain the licensing framework, which is pretty much in sync with Europeana's licensing framework. We try to make them feel involved in the process, and we try to, let's say, to build a network and a community. Yes, I think that we have made some progress, especially over the last 4 years on that. Now regarding the data space, to be honest, I hope that this will give us maybe tools and ideas to increase further the capability. However, I'm personally, I'm not sure how this will be achieved. I hope that now that we feel here in Greece, for example, that now some things are finally in order and we find some ways to work. I really hope that we will not try to reinvent the wheel here, and this will not cause more noise, because, you know, after all these years, the institutions and the public generally, they try to get familiar with Europeana, for example, and with this ecosystem. So I'm afraid a bit that they might be a little bit confused with other, you know, entities. But yeah, I think that we will find a way to use this in our advantage.
Right. Thank you. And Marcus, do you have a methodology to sort of build CHI capacity?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, we don't actually provide any data enrichment ourselves. So to sort of compensate for that, we work closely with our CHIs to help them to improve the quality of their data at the source. So we hold workshops, we have seminars with them covering topics like use of vocabularies, linked data vocabularies, copyright and licensing, things like GDPR for the content of the data, general best practices for data publication and structure. We cover the Europeana publishing framework tiers, and we also have recorded versions of those seminars and workshops on our YouTube channel, so other aggregators and other CHIs can enjoy them and make use of them after the fact. We also publish guidance on a number of topics, such as what features to look for when choosing a collections management system. And for those CHIs who are already partners in SOC, who already provide data to us, we have tools that help them to identify areas for improvement in their data quality. So, for example, finding images that might have incorrect licensing attributions. So if a photograph has a date that is, you know, over 100 years old, chances are good that that should probably be marked up as being public domain rather than being in copyright or a CC license. So those kinds of things we help with, and we have tools that will help them to do that. With regard to the data space, our feeling is that it's currently a bit too early to tell how that's going to affect our future strategy. We're focused primarily on making sure that we have good quality linked open data, rich RDF, and ubiquitous use of controlled vocabularies, which is an ongoing process. But for the time being, I don't really see that the data space is going to change that strategy. Hopefully it can be of benefit to the data space, but I think we have to wait and see how it shakes out.
Right, thanks. Thank you for that. And finally, Marco.
And about this topic, also for us is very important the capacity building, and for this reason we schedule specific meetings with our content providers focused on the capacity building, especially according to the needs of our content providers, like as mappings, enrichment methodologies, how to improve values, also how to, for example, how to insert terms in controlled vocabulary or thesaurus, or how they can improve terms in Wikidata. Sometimes also webinars about the APF, the Europeana Publishing Framework, or the license framework. Moreover, we also invite our partners to use the capacity building materials that is available in the Europeana portal, as our colleague said before. So we invite them to read the pages of the knowledge base, and for this reason, as I said before, for us the concept of capacity building is very important. Concerning the data space, also in our case, we are confident with the data space, with the help of the data space, and also on my side, but I think MCA side, I think that we need time, because it's a very difficult target, and we need also human resources, because sometimes there aren't human resources that project needs. So, but we are confident in general.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to all three panel members, Harris, Marco, and Marcus. Thanks for that discussion. I have one quick question. I need you each to give a one-word answer to this question then. If you were using Sage, would it be the CHI or the aggregator that used it? So, Marcus.
It would be the CHI.
Right. Marco?
Can I say both?
Yeah. Harris?
Yeah, both. Depending.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Depending on the provider, I mean, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think I hand over to Marie now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Actually, can we keep the panelists on stage, please?
Sure.
I have a question. Actually, I have two, maybe. Marco, you mentioned the human resources. This was a question that could have been also relevant for the previous one. How many people on your aggregator team are involved in this kind of data processing task? Even if it's not especially one for Marcus. But,
a couple.
A couple, you said?
A couple, yes.
Yeah, okay. Harris?
Well, the core team are 4 people, including me, who I am the developer, but the person that does the curation and the enrichment is, I would say, 1. But it's not only the technical part. I mean, there is the communication with the providers. So I will say all the four of us are somehow involved in the process.
And Marcus, then for you, for managing it all?
So we have 4 or 5 people on the SOC staff, but of those, I think there are only 2 who are working very closely with the CHIs with regard to harvesting, mapping, data processing.
Okay. And then maybe to
Marie
get
Veronique,
back...
sorry,
Yeah.
for us, a couple concerning the ingestion workflow, the technical workflow, then me and Maria.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Maybe then to get back to the question that was also asked in the previous panel about the documentation, how do you keep track of everything that is done according to a data set or to a CHI or to a provider? Do you have any tools specific or methodology? Marco? Oh, Harris, yes, please.
We realized after a specific point that we cannot anymore remember each case. Some things were in our heads. Now we try to use Jira and we try to document, especially particularities of each collection there in order for us to remember next time. Yeah, so it's not something very formal, but we try to keep it more structured now.
Marco? You're muted. We can't hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, Jira also for us. At the moment, we use this tool, and all is fine.
Okay, Marcus?
We also use Jira internally, and we also have a wiki where we keep track of data sets and data providers and any relevant information that may be pertinent there. I think probably, though, we have a little bit less to keep track of since we don't perform any data enrichment.
Okay.
Sorry, Marie Veronique.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yes,
I would like to add just a thing that concerning the human resources. We have also one person for the relation with providers and communication, and also other 2 people, Max and Maud, for communication. So when I say the 2 people, I focus on the ingestion process, so it's a little mistake.
No, but that's very good to have the kind of complete overview, as we have CHIs, member of the commission here, so we can give a good overview of how an aggregator works. Thank you very much again. I keep you a bit on stage to check if there are no questions among the participants. And if there is not, I'm going to thank you very much again. And thank you, Tom, for the moderation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
we came from a slight delay to be perfectly on time. So now I'm going to call on stage my colleagues from the steering group so that we can conclude the event. You are free to ask questions or even reach out to us after the event. You will be having an email address to reach out to us. There is also in the booklet of the program. So now I think I'm going to wrap up and say that this outreach event was particularly challenging because we had to present you something that is quite technical, and that might be challenging for someone that is completely new to the Europeana initiative. This is also why we also spent a bit of time to set the scene and really present all of the stakeholders here and what is being done concretely. And then I think even if we all share a kind of common goal, which is preparing, pimping the data up so that we can make it available on Europeana. We all have a different organization. We are all using different tools and different methodologies, and we all have different staff allocated to these missions. I hope we had 4 people dedicated to aggregation for our aggregator. So I think this is also where you can see that the main purpose of it all is sharing the data, sharing in a way that it can be interoperable. So for the moment, to the Europeana initiative, and now without you knowing it, it is actually already there in the data space. The purpose of these meetings is also to kind of make you all more familiar with this concept of data space. This is kind of new, but also need to make a proper transition from what we had before and what we could have in the near future. So I think that's all for me on the wrap-up side. Kerstin, Tom, anything to add to what we heard today?
I think maybe if I can make a start, I think what was very clear, specifically in the panels, but also in the presentations, is that we are at this kind of intriguing balance between really a lot of work being put in manually and kind of having interactions with the content providers and the cultural heritage institutions to really make sure that things work in a way that they are happy with. And then with the Sage tool, as we've seen, we also are kind of working at improving things and making things easier, and then having these AI supported possibilities that hopefully will make all our lives easier in the times to come. And I think it's also this thing that we see in our everyday work as aggregators when we speak with different types of institutions, where some are still at the very beginning of their digital transformation journey and others are further on down the line, and trying to really make sure that we can take everyone with us.
Yeah, I think there is, we've been talking a lot about enrichment, and I'm really interested in finding out more about Sage, and maybe this is something that is going to be able to not just sort of enhance information on Europeana, but it could be enhancing information that goes back on the CHIs. So there's a sort of a two-way beneficial process there.
So there is a comment from Christina.
It's just a little advertising for a webinar we're offering on Open Refine. I wanted to not derail the panel here.
No, that's a good information. Actually, I was wondering why there is no that much use of Open Refine among the people that we had today. This is something that we are also considering using. So yes, thank you, Christina, for the information. Thank you to my 2 colleagues for completing the wrap up. I think now what we have left to do is thanking all our speakers today. So the speaker who spoke for the introduction, setting the scene, the panelists, the demonstration, and the use case, of course. A big thank you, as usual, to the organizing team, the colleagues from the Europeana Foundation, Gina, Tamara, Henning, Hadina. They always do their magic, so it's everything goes smoothly as usual. And then last but not least, my 2 colleagues from the steering group who helped me shape this event. So thank you very much, Kerstin and Tom. And also thank you very much to all the participants. You were kind of a lot of people collected earlier, still a lot of survivor after all this very technical stuff. I hope it was easy to grasp. And in any case, Kerstin put the email address and you can still reach out to us. The video, the recording will be available on YouTube, and you can access it from the Europeana Pro page also. And stay tuned, and we'll see you again for the next episode, which will be on data publication, and it's scheduled already on the 23rd of November online, or a morning. So you can already save the dates. And let me thank you again. Enjoy your summer and see you all very soon.